Hey guys, this is BlankTech31 here. A little bit of a different video than I typically make, but I thought it was pretty important. Today we're going to talk about why DE Train is a fundamentally flawed map, and why I think that the map design definitely needs to be changed and addressed by Valve. And I think that until that is done, the map should definitely be removed from the map pool until further notice, because these changes are vital to this map, and I don't see how this map will be competitively viable without them. Before we get into like the big things that we're going to talk about today, I do want to first have you guys think about maps like Cache and Mirage, and maybe even Inferno. Yeah, I would say even Inferno. Like those maps, the way that they're laid out and designed, if you think about them, the map and like the buildings, and I guess you can say like the map geometry really defines how that type of map is played. Like think about peaking stairs to Palace, or apps in Inferno. It really defines like how you play those spots. And so the big thing about Train compared to those other maps is that without these props, like this map would just be open. There's really nothing to this map, right? So like these props really define how you play this map, and these are just some of the worst designed props in the game, and they're just clunky, and they just don't make good cover, and they're just not accurately designed. And I'm gonna get into why that's like a big gameplay issue. Okay, so like one of the first things that I notice about these trains is that none of them have couples on them. So like, how are you supposed to move them? Like, you can't connect them to each other. Like, why is that a thing? So you're telling me people just like push these boxcars? Like, how far you have to put, and you know how much these things weigh? Like, and how far do these people have to push these things? Like, you have to do it one at a time. You can't like hook any of them up. So I don't know. I think that's definitely one of the things that needs to be changed. Okay. The second thing I notice is, well, it's actually two things. So this is like 2 and 3. So this train, the wheels don't even line up with the tracks. So like, I'm assuming that the distance between these two is 4 foot 8.5 inches, because that's like standard US gauge. I know we're in Russia, but like the wheels are smaller. So I'm assuming this distance is 4 foot 8.5 inches, and like these don't fit on the tracks. And in Russia they use a wider gauge. That's like the distance between these two rails. They use a wider gauge in Russia, so like this is 6 feet, but like these wheels don't match the rails, so how are the trains even supposed to move? Like they don't even fit on the rails. It's just wrong. Okay. The next thing I noticed I was talking about is, besides the wheels not even fitting on the rail, the flange of the wheel, which is like that bumped raised part, is right in the middle. So that is not accurate at all, because the flange is supposed to be on the outside part of the wheel, like over here, and then that part is supposed to be against the inside edge of the rail, like this. And the flange is what keeps like the wheel on the rail. And then also these wheels, they're like perfectly circular, which is not correct. This part here should have a bit of a conical shape to it, so when the train goes around a super elevated curve, it's able to, hang on to the rails. Otherwise, it would just like tip over if this part was flat. Alright, so here is a diagram of the wheel that I was talking about. So as you can see, if this is your top of rail here, this hatch section, on the right you have the flange side, so that's that raised side, and that keeps the wheel like locked in place on the tracks. And as you can see, like the wheel is tapered here, and that's so when the train is in a super elevated curve, so that's when you have like another rail over here and this one's higher, and you do that so the train can take the curve at a higher speed. The train's going to tilt a little bit, and then that conical shape of the wheel helps the train tilt, and it will still rest on the top of rail, and the flange will still protect it from tipping over. But if this is just flat, like the wheel's just going to slide off. So, none of those boxcars could like actually be moved, and it's just, again, like just bad map design. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about was the bomb site train on B. So this train, as you can see, it has the two nuclear reactors stacked on it, and they're both facing like upwards. So first off, one, this car is loaded incorrectly because typically these types of intermodal cars are loaded with the cargo like this stacked on top of each other. I'll show a picture a little bit later. But yeah, so that's loaded incorrectly, and it would definitely be like a weight issue with the way that it's loaded. Okay, so next you might be wondering why I have these three guys stacked on top of each other, and this guy won't shut the hell up. I don't know why. So I have these three guys stacked on top of each other because if we assume that they're all 6 feet tall, the top of that guy's head is 18 feet, and I know his feet are like a little glitched, but you're not supposed to have like 3 people stacked on top of each other. But before I had it perfect, and like the 18, I don't know, the physics are glitching out. 18 feet was like right here, so we can assume that like then if that's 18 feet, then like top of this has to be like probably at least 21 right here. So why it's important that this is 21 feet is because based on the ARIMA Type H plate, ARIMA is the American Railway Engineering Maintenance Way Association. They write like the standards for railway engineering. This is 21 feet, right? So the Type H plate, which I'll show a picture of, that has a maximum height of 20 feet 3 inches. So that means that if this thing was like actually out on a railroad, it would probably be in like vertical clearance violation of pretty much every single bridge, and it would probably knock down like every bridge that the train tried to go under, which would not be good, obviously. Okay, so as I was talking about earlier, this is the ARIMA Type H plate, and as you can see, so this one, this standard applies to double stack container cars, which is what they were trying to, I think, replicate on train. And as you can see, like, you're probably thinking like, well, what is he talking about? This looks just like the reactor stacked on top of the train. Well, this is like a cross section of the double stack container car. So typically when they're loaded like they are in this picture, with containers like this stacked on top of each other. So it's very like untypical to see a container stacked vertically, and it's just incorrect. And so, as I was talking about earlier, the big problem was we determined the train was probably like 21 feet tall, and that just doesn't meet any of the clearance requirements, because as you can see here, this dimension from top of rail, so top of rail's down here, to the top of the container, that's 20 foot 3 inches, and we determined that that train was probably at least 21 feet, so you got like an extra, what was that, 8 inches, which, you know, is in violation. And you know, all these other standards that you have to abide by that are on this drawing. So you know, that is just why that bomb site is just, you know, unplayable. One last thing I want to talk about before I end the video. I was just about to start editing and I realized I forgot to mention this. So these things here that you know, kind of hold the rails in place, these are called cross ties. Okay, so now I'm noticing a bunch of stuff wrong with these now that I'm actually like looking at them a little bit closer in detail. Okay, so one, it looks like these are made of steel, fairly uncommon, but they are real. Steel ties are real. Usually they're made of wood or concrete. Okay, but the thing that I noticed is like the distance between these two. I mean, you're looking at like 10 feet. Okay, that is just wrong. That is just unrealistic. It's just unplayable, quite frankly. You know, these things, these ties, they shouldn't be spaced more than 19 inches. You should have like, you gotta have at least like 9 more ties in here, okay? And the reason why it's so important to have that many is because you need to have these in place to hold your rail together, because if you have them spaced this far apart, you know, there's all these forces with the train, and the last thing you want is like maybe the wheels start pushing the rails further apart. Like, you need to keep the rails constant, because, you know, if your gauge is all messed up, which we were talking about earlier, that's the distance between these two, you know, that's not good. You know, the wheels could slip off, you might have a derailment, but, you know, it's a little bit easier. But yeah, it's just wrong. So like, I realize that I don't necessarily maybe play this map as much as other people, and, you know, part of it is due to, you know, just all the design flaws that this map has. It's just one of the reasons why I just avoid playing it if I can. I just think that it's about time that these changes be addressed, and Valve really needs to make these changes and reintroduce the map and just replace the map in the meantime. I think a good candidate would be like Cobblestone. I think that would be a great map to bring back until this is fixed, because that one was 100% perfect. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it. But I think Cobblestone would bring some good variety, and I think just Train is like really, really stale and is just really needs to be fixed.